Yes, folks, New Zealand is about to copy draconian sexual consent laws from Victoria and Tasmania. Yet our so-called Western democracies have the audacity to call ourselves sovereign nations when we all have the exact same laws, or virtually the same laws. We all have the same, or virtually the same climate change policies, the same human rights laws, and virtually the same mass immigration policies, etc. So we really can't be considered sovereign nations anymore, but rather a globalised collective. In other words, the New World Order. What happens in one part of the world is automatically adopted in another. Now, recently I covered a story about sexual consent laws in Tasmania and Victoria, and now New Zealand is about to copy them. So how do I know that? Well, every time we're about to copy a law, TVNZ, the propaganda arm of the left, always do a story on it to make New Zealanders feel good about it before they actually announce the law change. Anyway, I'll start this off with the story I originally covered.
Watch out, because Victoria and Tasmania now have laws that effectively treat a man as guilty of rape until he can prove that he got explicit consent. It's not enough to say that one thing led to another and the partner seemed willing. You need an explicit yes. Now, this is a law that the New South Wales Law Reform Commission says in a draft report that New South Wales should now have too. It says a person's consent should not be presumed, and sexual activity should involve ongoing and mutual communication. Decision-making as well, and free and voluntary agreement. So, you need an explicit yes for every single step. Can I do this? Yes. Can I do that? Yes. Can I do... Trusting that your partner is okay with the sex because there's no physical or verbal resistance from her does not in itself, says the Commission, mean that there is consent. Now, this follows the high-profile case of Luke Lazarus, who was acquitted of raping 18-year-old Saxon Mullins outside his father's King's Cross nightclub.
He said, get on your hands and knees and arch your back. And I just did it. At that point, I was kind of, in autopilot a little bit. I just wanted to go, and this is kind of the quickest way. I thought I could leave, just do what he says, and then you can go.
A jury found Luke Lazarus guilty, but his conviction was quashed on appeal after a judge found that Lazarus might have thought Mullins was consenting.
She did not say stop or no. She did not take any physical action to move away from the intercourse or attempted intercourse.
Joining me is Bettina Arndt, author, trained as a clinical psychologist and a former lecturer on human sexuality. Bettina, it's great to see you again. Bettina, firstly, most couples engage in sex without verbal consent for every step. Now, does that make it an act of rape?
It does. I mean, if these changes went through in New South Wales law, it would mean that most of the sex most of us have would be illegal. And yet it's not good enough, Andrew, to have a signed contract at the beginning of the event. You have to have that consent all the way through, little yelps of approval, or maybe it can be actually non-verbal communication, so I suppose we can wag our tails. But the problem is for the guy is actually proving he had that consent, and particularly given that we are allowed to change our minds afterwards. This is a really bad deal for men.
Yes, it sure is a bad deal for men. Anyway, now listen to how TVNZ despicably used the Grace Mullane murder to propagandise the need for new sexual consent laws in New Zealand.
Grace Mullane's parents have now left New Zealand, and while justice may have been done for their daughter, across the country today a message that this trial must do something to prevent violence against women. Emily van Veldhoven reports.
Why does it keep happening?
It's just not getting any better. We need to act. We need to stop tolerating it.
That's the question Mark Longley, whose daughter Emily was murdered by her boyfriend 7 years ago, has after the trial of Grace Mullane.
I was heartbroken for them, having to sit there day in, day out, listening to this horrendous stuff about their daughter.
Do you find the defendant guilty or not guilty?
Guilty. Grace's death has sparked a much-needed conversation about violence against women, including the issue of consent.
I think it's really concerning that there are groups within our society that don't understand consent fully.
What has that got to do with the Grace Mullane murder? She was murdered by a thug.
That think that, buying a drink and having it accepted in a pub might mean consent, or that they said yes yesterday, they mean yes today.
The Mullane family's raised over $25,000 for White Ribbon, which has created videos like this to help educate on the topic.
They might say, yes, please, that's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all.
The Mullane trial has highlighted not just consent, but the accessibility of hardcore pornography.
It has increased amounts of violence in it. So what our kids are seeing is sexual relationships and behaviour that isn't real.
It leads to the kind of behaviour where a girl ends up dead.
Not only are White Ribbon wanting New Zealanders to have a conversation around consent, it's also issuing this challenge to men. If you see your friend saying something derogatory towards women, stop them. And it says it's not the only thing that needs to stop.
Victim blaming happens all the time. A girl gets raped on Queen Street. What was she doing on Queen Street alone? That's irrelevant.
No, it's not irrelevant. Women are not men and must protect themselves. They should not go on Tinder dates, and nor should they get drunk late at night on Queen Street. That is just plain dumb. Yeah, and now these left-wing thugs want to create a super broadcaster, just like the ABC in Australia.
The government is considering a mega merger of TVNZ and Radio New Zealand. Leaked proposal suggests it wants to create a new super broadcaster with a strong focus on public information.
You mean left-wing propaganda, don't you?
Emma Cropper reports.
The broadcasting minister's preparing a media shake-up, though he didn't really want to talk about it.
Do you have a preferred recommendation at this point?
No, I'm not going to go into any details because I haven't taken it to my colleagues in Cabinet.
The details have leaked to Radio New Zealand, one of the entities he's thinking about doing away with. One idea is to scrap RNZ and TVNZ to create a new powerful public broadcaster.
In other words, a huge state-controlled media paid for by the taxpayer.
I think the way to deal with general media issues in New Zealand, because we're a small market, is to make sure as a government we do what we can to support public broadcasting. That is our focus, is that they are the assets that we own.
TVNZ and Radio New Zealand wouldn't comment on the leaked proposals, but it's understood if this merged entity went ahead, it would operate as a not-for-profit. Part of it would be ad-free, and if that extends to TV, it could leave the government with a bill in the hundreds of millions to pay for programming.
What do you mean the government will pay? You mean the taxpayer, don't you?
If you're building it from scratch, it's going to cost a huge amount of money, maybe $500 million, and I'm just not sure the government will have the appetite for that.
Nationals concerned about the leaked plan.
If you create one big one, I think it's too much power. I think it's too much control, and I think that's bad ultimately for democracy.
What would you know about democracy? You're exactly the same. Anyway, now back to our so-called sovereign nations and something interesting Cross the Rubicon said the other day.
Hi there, how's it going? Today is the 17th of November. I was going to stand and talk, but I find it better just to walk and talk. It's a little bit windy, so hopefully you can hear this. But yeah, I was just reading the news today, and I want to talk about this Welsh separatist leader of Plaid Cymru in Wales, Liz Saville Roberts, who's gone and said she wants to make Wales a nation of sanctuary in the UK for the world's refugees. It just makes me wonder how insane these people are. These people are, I'm not going to swear, but they are effing nuts. And these people are in a position of power and influence. They really do make me sick. It might be me. I might be mad. You know, I question myself sometimes. But these people are so out of touch with the common people, aren't they?
Yes, and I can really understand his frustration. These people do not care about democracy, and they do not care about sovereignty. They're only interested in the woke vote, and they get their ideas from America.
The left loves impoverished immigrants from the developing world, and why wouldn't they? They make our cities safer, they tell us. They improve our schools. They provide the backbone of our economy. They do the work that we won't do. They are diverse. They are our strength. They're the best of America, even though technically they're not Americans. Sanctuary cities love them best of all. That's why they've become sanctuaries for illegal immigrants. Every Democrat now running for president has affirmed this repeatedly.
If you could, would you take the wall down now? Here.
Yes.
Like you have a wall.
Absolutely.
Knock it down.
Offer a home to refugees. That is who we are. That's our values. That's part of what we do.
So instead of building a wall or closing the border, we should choose compassion instead of cruelty.
We welcome refugees and bring people out of the shadows.
Immigration is not a security issue. It is an economic and a humanitarian and a family issue. There is no such thing as an illegal human.
There is no such thing as an illegal human. Good point, Kirsten Gillibrand. We appreciate your eloquence. Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf believes that so deeply that last year she warned illegal immigrants in her city, including several criminals, that an ICE raid was coming. She wanted to give them time to flee, and they did. As she later explained, she had no choice. All good people want more illegal immigrants in their cities.
It is a continued perpetuation of a racist lie that immigrants are not valued members of our society. We in Oakland know better. We in Oakland have a community that welcomes and honors all people.
Except not next to my house.
No matter where they came from or how they got here.
In Oakland, they're welcoming. In fact, the whole state is welcoming. In his inaugural address this spring, the incoming governor of California, Gavin Newsom, echoed those words. Everyone can come to California, he said. Absolutely everyone.
Let us build a house stronger than the coming storms, yet open to the world. A house that provides shelter to all who need it and sanctuary to all who seek it.
Yeah, and not one of them in that clip mentioned the truth. Not one of them cares about illegal immigrants. They're only interested in their future vote and getting votes from other stupid woke folk.